I am going to record this for people who couldn't make it today.
Okay.
But yeah, if you could all mute yourself if you're not talking, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat while we're going. And I really do hope other people might feel inspired after hearing some of our stories to start sharing their story too. So that's a great opportunity for that. But welcome everybody and happy World Veterinary Day. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Crystal Heath and I'm a shelter veterinarian and the co-founder of Our Honor. And just some quick updates that are pretty exciting. The declaw ban in California, which was AB 2606, which a lot of us have been advocating for, passed its first committee or passed its first hearing, which that is the first time the declaw ban has ever been able to pass. You know, once the legislators see that the California Veterinary Medical Association is opposing it, they kind of end up killing the bill. But this time we had so many veterinarians support and so many veterinary organizations support the bill that it was allowed to go through. But it has a long way to go. There will be other hearings and we do need people to call in support of the declaw ban. So I'm going to post a little link here to the Signal group where we're all sort of messaging, so we can give you updates on when it's going to be heard next. And you can just call in while it's being heard and give your support. And it's really fun. It's a great way to get involved in legislation, and it's really easy, and it's kind of nerve-wracking at first to speak, but then it's exciting to be a part of something that really made a lot of change. So I encourage you all to get involved with the declaw ban process because it's a lot of fun. And I really think we're going to make history. And it's just outrageous that the California Veterinary Medical Association continues to not support it in light of the decades of research now and success of declaw bans throughout the world and how they have protected people, cats, and veterinarians. So that's really exciting. That's what happens when you have a public Zoom meeting, I guess. Anyway, on a sad note, we have, I'm gonna make somebody else host too, because I feel like we might need more people to help out.
I had just sent you, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I had just sent you a message. I was worried about letting that person in because of their name, and I private messaged you asking if you knew who it was, because I was getting ready to get rid of them, and then that happened.
Okay, thank you for being on top of it. All right. Yeah, I do not know who the person is. Anyway, so on a sad note, we are up to 35,516,189 birds affected with avian influenza. And fortunately, it is getting a great deal more buzz and media attention, and discussions are being had. I feel like more people now, just in the general public, know what ventilation shutdown is and know what a horror it is. And unfortunately, the veterinary community still isn't talking about it very much, but the news media is, and that's a good thing. And the AVMA convention is in July, and I will be there. I know there are a lot of animal advocacy groups that are planning on nonviolent protests at the AVMA convention because, we've reached out many times politely asking them to reclassify ventilation shutdown as a not recommended form of depopulation. They continue to ignore our calls and emails, and it's pretty frustrating. And just this recent case with Rembrandt Farms and Glenn Taylor, billionaire owner of Rembrandt Farms, 7 years ago killed 5.5 million of his birds when they were infected with avian influenza. He got $11.3 million in taxpayer money for depopulating his birds. That farm is located in the middle of the Mississippi Flyway. there's many wild migrating birds flying over that farm. They knew it would happen again, and they failed to stockpile the equipment needed to use AVMA preferred methods of depopulation. They again resorted to ventilation shutdown. Activists went there after it had all taken place and found birds still alive, walking around. And we know with ventilation shutdown, they suffer for hours before being killed. So many of those birds were probably still alive when they were discarded and thrown in those trucks. It is a horrifying event that took place, and the AVMA has been silent on it. And it just goes to show that the AVMA is continuing to lend legitimacy to this practice, continuing to make it an option when it really shouldn't be an option for these billionaires, who have a failed business model and rely on taxpayers to subsidize their losses. So we'll continue to speak out against ventilation shutdown and pressure the AVMA, but we're all here because we want to find out about other people in the veterinary profession who are fighting back against unethical systems and hear their stories. And so we have today Dr. Erin Zamzow. She's a graduate of the Washington State University College of Veterinary Medicine, class of 1990. She works in small animal medicine and equine medicine, focusing on equine dentistry. And she also attended the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society course. And she's the veterinarian for Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest. And that sanctuary houses 16 chimpanzees, 4 Jersey cows, and a barn cat. And we also have Dr. Sherstin Rosenberg. She's a graduate of UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. She's the veterinarian at Happy Hen Animal Sanctuary and the mom of notorious Zoe Rosenberg. And we also have Carla Cabral, who is an RVT and was a research scientist and manager of a mouse colony for 4 years at the University of Arizona. So she can speak to the lab animal side of things. So I'll just hand it off to, first, I don't know if you all heard, saw the news stories about Dr. Tamara Bronkers. She made the news standing up to the Department of Agriculture over in the UK. She had ethical concerns. She was silenced, dismissed, not listened to, and faced a great deal of stress from not being heard, not being listened to for voicing ethical concerns. She ended up being awarded a settlement of I think 1.2 million pounds, and her story made the headlines. And it's fantastic that these stories are starting to get out, but everyone here today, their stories should be in the news as well. And there are so many other people who have stories just like that too, that should be heard and should be out there. So I'll start with Dr. Sherstin Rosenberg, who is right now at Happy Hen and has a lot of work to do. So I'm glad you can join us, but please share with us what you experienced when you were a student at UC Davis.
So when I was a student at UC Davis, I graduated in 1998 from the School of Veterinary Medicine. And back then, terminal surgery was normal. That was the normal surgery. So when you took surgery class, it was a terminal surgery class. And I started out veterinary school not even realizing that I would have to do this. I don't know why I didn't know. I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't know. But I found out, my first year or so, and I knew I wouldn't be able to kill dogs to learn surgery. And luckily because terminal surgery is the normal, or was the normal, they called not killing dogs, that was alternative. So fortunately for the general surgery class, there was an alternative offered. And very few of us, there were 5 or 6 of us that chose that option out of a class of 108. And just to kind of give some background, I mean, we were really oddballs. People thought we were really strange and looked down on us for doing that. Myself and my 2 colleagues that were on our surgical team for the general surgery class, we actually took an alternative surgery class up in Pullman, Washington at Washington State University that summer. It was several weeks. It was very intense, and probably Dr. Zamzow deserves a lot of credit for the fact that that class existed. But it was incredible. It was superior to anything I got at UC Davis, actually, as far as surgical training. But we just wanted to be sure that we weren't missing out on anything, and we wanted to go the extra mile to be great surgeons. So anyway, it was horrifying going through that first general surgery course and having our peers killing their dogs at the end of each class. We learned on cadavers, and just being in the room was horrifying. When it came time to learn how to do spays and neuters on dogs and cats, those were survival surgeries. And so those animals got to go back to the shelter. So just for anyone that doesn't know, that the dogs that are used in the terminal surgery program, at least at that time, were sourced from the local shelter in Sacramento. And there was a huge overpopulation problem then. I think it's gotten better now. So the shelters were euthanizing dogs because they couldn't find homes. And a lot of the dogs would come to UC Davis and be used in terminal surgeries. So for the spay and neuter, those dogs did go back to the shelter. And I'm gonna call my colleague that rescued her dog, Diane, just in case she doesn't want me to share her name. So Diane's dog was going to be killed at the shelter, her spay dog. And so she rescued the dog and took her home, and found her a new, wonderful, adoptive, loving home, named her Becky. Becky was a great dog, got a home. And so Donnelly loved this dog, Becky. So then it came time for us to do our advanced surgical training class. And at that time, there was no alternative surgery option for that class. And so we actually got permission from the dean to be able to use ethically sourced cadavers from the teaching hospital. These were dogs that had been killed by, these were dogs that had been humanely euthanized for medical reasons. And then their owners had given, or their guardians had given them permission for us to use them for surgical training, which was, so I was blown away by, people being willing to do that. So anyway, it was horrific, again, being in the surgery class, having our fellow students bringing these wonderful, happy, tail wagging dogs into the anesthesia prep room, knowing that they were going to be killed at the end of the class. And so one day it was our day to practice or to learn how to do thoracotomy and chest tube placement. And in walks Diane's dog, Becky, with one of the surgical teams. And we all knew she was destined to die today. And we couldn't figure out how she even got there, because she was adopted out to a loving home. And anyway, I knew immediately that we couldn't let her die. We had to do something. And so I told the other people on my team that, I was willing to take an F for the class or the lab, and we could give our cadaver dog to somebody else, and they agreed. And so I went to the surgical team that was supposed to be doing surgery on Becky that day. And I explained the situation to them, told them how much their colleague, Diane, loved this dog. And the student that was the surgeon that day, he looked at me and he said, "This is my opportunity to learn how to do this surgery, and I need to do this today." And that was it. No more discussion. That was it. And nobody even, honestly, most of the class just wouldn't even look at me. And I was just in a panic trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to save Becky? This can't happen. And so, and you have to understand that the amount of tension and pressure in that room was just sky high, because
I feel it. I know what you're feeling. Yes.
Yes.
I get that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, these students are learning how to do surgery, which is already hard. And then they've kind of built up their courage to be able to kill their dog after the surgery. And so for me to just break that all to pieces was a lot. But I went up to the front of the room and I asked for everybody's attention, and I explained the situation to them and told them, we have to save Becky. And our team is willing to give up our cadaver dog and take an F. If there's another team that's willing to take our dog and take our cadaver dog and give their live dog to this other team that has Becky and is unwilling to do surgery on a cadaver dog today. Nobody would do it. Nobody. I couldn't believe it. And I went to the professor and I begged him to help and to save Becky and to do something, to just, anything. And he wouldn't do anything. He said, it's important that these students learn how to do the surgery. It's a teaching class. That was it.
Oh my gosh.
So Becky was killed that day. And honestly, I feel like I'll never forgive myself for not doing more, because I should have just broken the whole thing apart. I should have gone to the news. I should have walked out.
Yeah.
But we just, did our surgery on our cadaver and went through, and yeah, it was horrific.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, I get that feeling. And you were so brave for going in front of the class and saying that. I mean, I have felt that in vet school and in my undergrad, like when we're chopping off sheep's tails and things like that. And the students are being put in this position where like they're supposed to advocate for their patient, but this system has like warped this whole thing so much where they can't even be like, I can't advocate for my patient. I can't rescue my patient. I mean, when somebody brings us an animal into our practice and they're a healthy dog or cat and they want to euthanize them, we often are like, well, here, let me call up my rescue friends, or let me see what I can do to advocate for this animal and hopefully save their life. And you're right off the bat, when students are young and impressionable, telling them, no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to advocate for your patient. Your training is more important than someone's life. When clearly there's better ways to do this. There's animals who need surgery that could get surgery under the guidance of, with students doing the surgery under the guidance of an experienced surgeon. And I think, Dr. Rosenberg, I thank you for doing that, because now UC Davis does not have a core surgery program that requires terminal surgeries. I didn't have to kill any of my patients in vet school. In my training, there is a livestock program where, like, another class you could take where they do still kill the patients, but it's not core, and hopefully that will change too. But yeah.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Interestingly, I think the vet school understood what had happened, and the dean actually met with Diane and I and urged us not to go to PETA or anyone. They were so scared that this was going to come out. And I do think that was instrumental in making them decide to end the terminal program, because they realized it was a matter of time before it blew up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it took so much bravery just to do what you did. And, you know, don't feel guilty about not doing more, because, and now you produce Zoe, who's doing so much for the animals. So, I mean, you could just see like how that experience produced Zoe. Like it's just, it's such a just heartbreaking story. And do you have any advice for students who are experiencing the same thing? Because sadly, there are schools out there who still do terminal surgeries, and students are still facing these same issues.
Well, I mean, for sure, if you have advance notice, I for sure would try to get the dean of the school to offer an alternative using a cadaver, because honestly, when I think about it now, I didn't really realize it at the time, but when I think about the moral discord that we created by being in that room with our cadaver while all those other students were killing their dogs, I think that's huge. I think just having that alternative, that option, puts so much pressure on the school. So I definitely would suggest doing that. And I mean, honestly, if you get in a situation like the one I was in, you know, I think I thought I was such a part of the system then, but I think I would have thought that if I had gone to the news, I would have been expelled, and I probably would have been, but there would have been a lawsuit and I probably would have won. And that would have been huge. And so I would encourage the next person in that situation, you know, blow it up, just take it all the way, because it was wrong what happened.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I think now is the time. There's going to be that person who is going to blow it up and blow it apart, and it's going to be a huge story. Like, look at what vet students are being forced to do right now. But yeah, fantastic story. Thank you so much for doing that. And I want to pass it off to Erin now. Dr. Zamzow, you have a really compelling story. I'd love to hear more. I know you shared it briefly with me, but tell us the whole thing.
Thank you. Well, I'm old, so I can't remember the whole thing. It was back in the 80s. But no, seriously, wow, that story about actually having a dog that you adopted out come back in is, I mean, I felt my heart rate go up, and I felt that same just that huge conflict of, you know, we've got to do something. And I think, you know, it's so, I remember feeling, I mean, I went to vet school at Washington State University between 1986 and 1990. And I remember that feeling of when you...
Oh no, we lost her. Oh, I hope she comes back. Well, while she's coming, oh, we know, there she is. She is still in the room. I'll give her a couple seconds. Erin, are you there? We lost you. Well, I can, maybe, I don't know, Carla, do you want to go next? I mean,
I'm
there
back.
She is. Okay,
sorry,
perfect.
My internet was being really funky, but I think it's fixed now. So I just remember that feeling. You know, I went into veterinary school pretty naive as well. So, you know, I mean, I just wanted to be a vet and help animals. And so when these things come up and you have this initial feeling of, well, wait a minute, that's wrong, but everybody else is going along with it. I remember just thinking, I'm going nuts. Like, the world is upside down. What is, it's just really ungrounding. It's really unsettling. And my first experience was, well, I mean, there were a few experiences just going through veterinary school where I started to get the feeling that maybe I had been a little bit idealistic about what veterinary medicine was all about. And my first experience with a terminal procedure was actually in our junior year, and it was a cardiology lab where we were supposed to induce a cardiac event in an anesthetized animal and then resuscitate them. And we were supposed to do it 2 times. And the 3rd time we were supposed to do the intrathoracic cardiac massage. And so opening up the chest wall, and that was going to be terminal. And as the instructor is explaining this lab to us, there start to be some little whispers in the room, like, wait a second, what, we're going to kill the dog, you know? And
you
so
didn't even know ahead of time.
didn't really know ahead of time. I don't know how maybe we just were too busy and didn't go through our syllabus or something. But so a few people got together and talked about it that night. It was, you know, before the procedure. And basically we're like, you know, we're not going to do it. And so the professor had heard that some people were going to refuse to do it. And he brought us in and said, if anybody in this class refuses to do this entire procedure, I will take your grade down, an entire grade. And I was always, you know, you try to get into vet school, you're working so hard to get those grades, and you just, you know, a lot of type A personalities, and we're good students. And I just kind of went, and a friend of mine looked at each other and went, all right, whatever. You know, I mean, it was still kind of upsetting, but it was more upsetting that they would use that manipulation tactic, you know, very, very manipulative and abusive, really. And, but most of the other students caved and went ahead and did it. And I'm like, why do you care? It's your ethics versus a grade. You know, it's not like you're trying to get somewhere beyond vet school.
It's hard to think that vet school is unethical, and it's the student's job to stand up to what your professors are telling you. Like it's a mind,
right.
You know,
So
game.
So it puts you in a position of kind of like, can I trust this person? Or, you know, it's not a great learning environment when that happens. But so we got through that, and then actually started planning in our junior year. We started planning for our senior year, which is, you know, it's all clinical rotations. Or I'm sorry, in our sophomore year, we actually started planning for our junior surgery year. See, this is what happens when it's 30 something years ago. And and we brought up at the end of our sophomore year, we brought it up to the dean and to the administrators and to some of the staff, the teaching staff, that we had ethical concerns with the terminal nature of the surgery. So when I was going to school, we did a procedure on an animal, and they were sourced from the shelter. Most of them are perfectly adoptable. There was no spay-neuter program through the veterinary school at that time. And we would do a procedure, a surgical procedure, and then we would recover them and monitor them for 2 weeks, walk them, take care of them, you know, get to know them, watch their wound healing. Usually it was a pretty minor procedure, like you know, a skin incision or something like that for the first round. And then we would do another procedure the next time, and then euthanize the animal. And we just, 2 other friends of mine and I were very disturbed about that. And so we had some meetings with the administration and teaching staff there. And we got a lot of pushback from them initially. They basically just said, we're not going to accommodate this. Go to another school. We'll try to do a lateral transfer somewhere, but Pullman is not having this. And unfortunately, and we just wanted to do this for ourselves. We just wanted to get through vet school with our souls intact, you know? And I got pushback from close friends and family even that said, just get through vet school and then you can go do all this good. And I just thought the price was too high, you know, the cost was too high. So we stuck to our guns. I mean, they threatened us with, you know, expulsion or just, you know, you will not continue this program. And then we had some really good mentors that I think probably went on to help continue the program. But we did eventually have to reach out to an organization at that time that did end up putting sort of behind the scenes political pressure or legal pressure on the veterinary school. And so we were called in shortly thereafter to talk about how we could design this program. And we worked with Dr. Carl White, who was the head of equine medicine at that time. And he was fantastic. He created, worked with us to brainstorm and create, you know, experiences that would help us with, you know, all kinds of surgical techniques that I think made it a better program in the long run. I think it really made it a better program because we learned some of these really basic skills that before we were ever even in an animal's abdomen. So we got through. We were not allowed to graduate with our graduating class because we ended up developing this program, took time, and we ended up doing, we did do one terminal surgery each on there were some terminally ill kind of end stage sheep at the veterinary teaching hospital. And they were really should have been euthanized. So we were able to do that. We did cadaver surgeries that we had to source and handle ourselves. And we also did spay neuter. There were actually 3 of us that ended up doing it. One was a year behind us, but we were so late that he was doing it with us. We took shelter dogs and did spays or neuters on them. And then we were able to rehome them. And we tracked all those 3 dogs did do well. My dog lived to be about 14. I would get a Christmas card every year from the people that adopted her. And, you know, we all went on to do lots and lots of surgery in our practice. The pushback that we got, the retaliation that we got was in large part from our classmates who, they wanted some, not all, obviously, but some wanted a special designation on our diploma saying that we were not qualified to do surgery or that we hadn't completed, you know, the surgical training or something, which is, I mean, like anybody actually looks at your diploma. I don't even know where my diploma is, you know? And so it's like, you think a client's going to walk in, you know, to an exam room with your diploma on the wall and go, I see you're not really trained in surgery, you know? So it was kind of silly. They didn't end up doing it. They didn't honor that request. And, but, you know, I think it's just when somebody kind of goes against the grain and stands up for something like that, I know there's people that genuinely disagree, but I also think sometimes there's a degree of guilt or just feeling like, you know, I don't know, like, what, well, now you're saying that I'm bad because I'm going to do this, you know, and we weren't saying that. We were not condemning any of our classmates. We were just trying to get through ourselves. But, you know, just a lot of, you know, we were both vegetarian and there's a lot of, oh, you know, that's not conducive with being a vet, you know, and so just silly things like that. But we all, you know, we all got through it and we all ended up doing a lot of surgery once we graduated. And, you know, one of our major points was we only get to do 1 or 2 surgeries in that junior surgery course anyways. And quite often they're very minor. So you're not going to, you know, when you do your splenectomies and your intestinal anastomosis and your orthopedic surgeries, that's all when you're out in practice, you know?
Yeah, it is. Most of the surgeries that I've had to learn, it was learn on the job, you know.
Right. With a
So,
mentor, like you should.
yeah,
In an animal that
exactly.
needs it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that whole like guilt thing is so true. You know, if any vegans get this all the time, what, you think you're better than me? It's like, I didn't say anything. I'm just over here trying to do my thing and try to live my life as the way I see fit. And I'm
Yeah.
not judging you or anything. And yet it's the whole, and hurt people. They want to punish you for doing something that, you know, deep down, they probably wish they could do the same thing. But, you
Maybe
know,
in some cases, or it's just you know, like just go along with the group. It feels more comfortable that way, or it feels safer
yeah,
that way. Or, you know, I don't condemn anybody who didn't do it or doesn't do it. I think we can make it more of a normal thing. And then we'll look back, like a lot of the practices that we do, and go, oh, you know, I mean, a lot of things we do to each other that we do in society that, you know,
absolutely.
hopefully we can change and look back and go, wow, that was really, really messed up. Like, why did we all go along with that? You know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many things. I think all like pre-vet students, vet students, medical students should all really read medical history to understand like the atrocities that medicine committed in the past. And not just, I mean, it's not like medicine's especially bad, but all industries, but the racism, the sexism, the unethical things that they did, freaking grave robbing. They would rob graves to get cadavers to practice
Mhm.
on, you know,
Yeah.
and that there's a culture that comes up, you know, it's a white male privilege culture and ideology, and it's hard to change that over time, especially when you have like an institution. And there's no reason to believe that how we're practicing today is not going to be looked back in the future by future generations as just horrifying as well.
Yeah.
So, and we really have to like take a hard look and be introspective about what are we doing right now that is going to be horrifying to future generations. So yeah, I mean, do you have how did you get through, like, did you really feel like ostracized? Did you have like hardly, did people not want to talk to you in vet school? Did you feel
Oh,
like kind of an
no,
outsider? No.
you know, even like I still had some good friends, and they would almost, you know, kind of like tease me about it. And then some other students would be like, you know, I really admire what you're doing. I'm not going to do it, but you know, I really admire it. And so, no, we weren't like really ostracized or anything like that. I mean, or it didn't matter. I don't know. It probably helped that you know, the person I went through this with was like already becoming one of my very best friends, and his still is. So you know, we had each other to lean on, and another really good friend. And but no, I still had friends in school, and
That's awesome.
you know, I was never a huge social person anyways, but you know, we had a small group. And yeah, I know people talk behind our backs, and it was just like, you know, whatever. But I have to give credit to, you know, my friend. I don't think I would have done it without her really going, you know, Erin, we had to do something, like, you know, we can't do this. Let's do something. Because I was very much, you know, like Sherstin said, I was kind of in the system. And even though things were horrifying, you know, it was like, well, what can you do? Can you go up against, you know, an institution like this? And so that was really sort of a launching point, I think, in my whole life for going, yeah, you can. You should go up against injustice. You should speak out against injustice. And, you know, even when it's hard. And not that I always do, but, you know, I try.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it helps if you do have a friend. And I know there's probably so many vet students and pre-vet students who don't have close friends and are just sitting there isolated, concerned about doing this, but feeling like, nobody here in this room is going to back me up.
Yeah.
I just have to suck it up and go with it. And
Yeah.
how haunted they probably are for years
Yeah.
after. And I always wonder how much of it, the high rates of suicide in veterinary medicine are due to these issues. I mean, we always talk about debt and like clients and social media, but like the internal, like having to go against what you think the world should be and how you should act, on a daily basis, and remembering the eyes of an animal that you were forced to kill in your training. I think that does go with you.
I think that for me, a lot of those awarenesses occurred in vet school. And so it's a developing process, I think, when you're put into a situation like that or an environment like that. And we're young, we're young, and a lot of our opinions and stances on things are still developing. We're still absorbing a lot of that information and processing it. And so it can be, I think sometimes there can be conflicts that you didn't even know that's how you felt. And maybe you feel that way, but, trying to work through all that and process through all that can be soul rendering, I mean, it's really, it can be really a challenging time. So I think it probably does contribute to that, in addition to what we see once we get out and practice with various.
And we think of like students as being very liberal and progressive, but in many ways, like especially in the sciences, we're very conservative and we're very much rule followers and perfectionists.
Especially in the veterinary world. I mean, that it tends to be pretty. I mean, I don't know. I at least it, it was then. It was a lot of white. And I don't know about conservative, but kind of rule followy, and I'm not sure how to describe it. So,
yeah. It's like, there's just such this pressure not to disrupt what is going on.
Well, and I felt that, even in my career, whether it was standing up to an employer about their treatment of an animal or a patient, or, speaking out about animal cruelty cases, or that sometimes the prevailing laws or law enforcement or whatever didn't necessarily think was cruel. It's
still, I mean, when you think about what billionaires can do to chickens, and then I work in a shelter in Stockton, and they're citing people for having roosters in their backyards and like cockfighting. And it's like, well, when it's the billionaire doing massive animal cruelty to millions of animals, that's nothing. But when you have a cockfighting ring, or like somebody with extra chickens in their backyard, usually communities of color, usually impoverished communities, they get the
low-hanging fruit.
Down.
Yes, exactly. You'll make an example out of, a lower income person or a person of color, but not go after. But we do that. We do that in almost all areas of our justice system and law enforcement. We, look at the crash in 2008. Nobody's been prosecuted for that. Nobody's been prosecuted for the Iraq War. But, by God, you've got a couple ounces of pot on you, you're going to spend 40 years in prison.
Yeah.
There's a design to that, as we know.
The rules were created by the white men in power. To make sure that they are not breaking the rules no matter what happens. But that was fascinating and wonderful, and I so thank you for your bravery. We're kind of getting short on time, but Carla, I think, it has a fascinating story just from the RVT perspective, laboratory animal perspective. Tell us your tale, Carla.
Well, I feel very intimidated now because I don't have, exactly this sort of story. I can say that First, let me just say, if anyone hasn't noticed in the chat, Alejandra put Moral Distress in Veterinarians by R. Montoya, and I just brought it up in PubMed, so it looks like a good read. I don't know if anybody has already read it, but I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. So yeah, luckily when I went through vet tech school, it's nothing compared to veterinary school at all. And we did not have to we did surgery, and we did actually work on cadavers, but never a live animal. We still did get to see some of the atrocities that happen. And I very much remember going out to our one farm animal class. Your whole knowledge about farm animals is like this big, and you go out to a farm, and they were dehorning that day. So they, brought the cow into the stanchion and just clipped those horns off, and blood went flying everywhere. And everyone's like, oh, there just wasn't, when you guys talk about it, it really feels like the mental gymnastics that you have to do, the cognitive dissonance that's involved when, to me, you're being indoctrinated to just accept that what is happening, what you are learning, what goes on, the surgeries that, the animal is put to sleep at the end. We all knew about all this, and it just, that's what happens. A few die so that so many more will live, and all the excuses that come up. And it is hard to buck against a system that you may not even be aware that you should be bucking up against, right? And for me, I just can't, now thinking back, that I didn't speak up, that I didn't say anything, that I just went along with it, pains me to this day. I mean, this is why I do what I do, because it pains me that I spent all my life loving animals, and I spent all this time attempting to save animals' lives, only to turn around and eat another one for dinner, right? I mean, it's unfathomable. And when I started work in research, I bought into it completely. I was completely drawn in. I'm going to be saving people. I'm going to be saving animals. This is important. How else could it be done, right? You're fed that all the time. And the biggest thing was my PI, the principal investigator, the person in charge of the lab, was really ruthless when it came to feelings. If you had any feelings, you were just knocked right down. She made it very clear when we would interview new students who were coming in that it was extremely important that they understand that they would have to be killing mice. And if they couldn't handle surgeries on mice, killing the mice, then they absolutely had no business being there. And so many probably really great students who would, maybe they've gone on, hopefully, to do wonderful things, but if you showed any emotion, if you cared at all, you weren't even considered. You just were kicked right out. And people that did come in, if they had any questions, were also, and I know in many labs, there were people who questioned and they were thrown out of that lab. Our lab, another lab, if anybody, there was immediate backlash for people. It was made very clear that that is just the way that it happens, and that you're the one who just doesn't know what you're talking about. Even if you can bring up studies that are done, if you can bring forth facts, you're not the PI. you don't have your doctorate, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just idealistic, that's not the way the world works. You're just constantly being told all of these things. And, you know, I was in charge of thousands of mice. The numbers of mice are, it's just mind boggling, and the conditions that they're in. And I was told over and over by the technicians that were down in the actual animal care facility that I was, if not the only, one of the only people who actually cared about their mice, who cared about the animals, not cared about them because they were worth something monetarily, not cared about them because you needed to get the research done, but actually saw them as individuals. And I guess the only story I have, I get teary-eyed. The only story that I can think of right off the top of my head is doing water maze testing. I don't know how many of you know what water maze testing is. I know we're running out of time, but briefly, in this huge pool of water, you put the mice in and they have to swim around until they find a platform. There's a lot more to it, but that's the basics. And I had Alzheimer's mice I was working with, so they're already cognitively not all there. And one of the mice, I mean, we have nets and you're right there, but one of the mice drowned, went under, and I scooped them out and I attempted some sort of CPR, and we lost that mouse. And I was just devastated and, you know, crying, and I didn't want to continue for a while. Like I couldn't, I had been caring for this individual for a year. I had been weighing them every day, and I got so much shit for that, excuse me. I was just berated. I was told that, you know, come on, you know, it's one mouse, just get on with the job, stop it. You know, these are all the things you're told, just how stupid you are for having these feelings. And it sticks with you, like to hear that all the time, that you're the stupid one, that you don't know what you're doing, and you're told you can't have these feelings if you are going to make it.
Did someone just say a swear word?
No.
Sorry,
Sorry. Oops.
one. I let one go. Sorry.
It's all fine.
So anyway, that's,
Sorry.
you know, I know we're running out of time, so I'll end it there, but that is the sort of thing, you know, when I went vegan, again, it was, I didn't belong, and I didn't belong. And when I was leaving, I said, you better lock it, because I was in a very secure mouse facility where you have to derobe, go through the air vent, you know, the air shower, and dress on the other side. And I told them on the way out, you better lock the doors behind me because I'm coming for you. And they knew I meant that I meant it. And, you know, they kind of chuckled, but also had a little fear because they knew the time is coming to end this.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, stories from the inside, it's amazing the gaslighting that I've heard about in the lab animal industry. You know, on the one hand, they say, oh, they care so much about the animals. On the other, like, you're having to do all of these horrible things to them, and we're doing these experiments on them because we would find it unethical to do these things in human beings. So that's why. And I want to invite Alejandra to share her story. I know she's been talking in the chat. Please tell us all about what you experienced.
Hi, my name is Ale, and I'm a vet in Australia. And it resonates so much what you guys have been talking about, because first of all, when I was in vet school, I went through exactly the same thing and refused to do surgeries on terminal animals. And that did create just a horribleness that just led me to my anxiety and depression that I experienced until now. And PTSD kind of syndrome on surgery. I actually, you guys are doing much better than me, because I just can't do surgery without experiencing anxiety and remembering those days. So, and I think Krista has invited me to talk more about the moral distress thing, though. But that is moral distress. Moral distress is defined as the anguish and psychological distress that a person experiences when they're forced to do something that goes against their values. So that article that was shared, I wrote it in 2019 as part of my PhD on the effect of moral distress and the veterinary shortage, pretty much is what I'm working on. And it comes from, in 2016, I was working at a university teaching hospital as an emergency clinician. And they were asking me to put animals down that were not sick, feral cats or like kittens, stray kittens. And I plainly refused, and I went like, no, this is not okay. I'm just not going to put down this line of 10 kittens that have nothing wrong with them, not even cat flu or nothing, no medical justification. Or this dog that had just attacked a chicken, and I'm like, because he's been a 18-month-old boisterous dog that is just being a dog, not aggressive or anything. Or this cat that was not longer producing kittens, and they wanted to put her down for that. I'm like, this is not okay. And I got fired on the spot. And they said, well, you cannot refuse to do these things because animals are property, and we have to do what the owner wants us to do. And then I went back to the same university to do my research, and I wrote that article on moral distress, but not before completely considering leaving the profession. At that time, I was really depressed. I had suicide ideation. I still have severe anxiety. And if it wasn't because I started doing that research, I would have completely left veterinary practice, which is something that I started working on when I was like 14 or 15 years old. So that's my story. And I think what we're all experiencing here, or what is being discussed, is actually moral distress. That's the term, and it has been widely researched in medical professionals, in policemen, in the military. But there's nothing or very little on veterinarians and veterinary staff. So I think from if we really wanted to push for a change, doing that scientific push that, hey, this is something that actually happens and is affecting us, might be a really good way to actually create change.
Yeah, like moral distress in vet students, moral distress in lab animal workers. Like this is such an important field of research. But I think, just having these conversations and sharing stories and letting others know that they're not alone, that a lot of people have these feelings, and getting more people to feel comfortable sharing their stories by hearing other stories is so important. I think this storytelling is what really makes social change happen. So I thank everyone for being brave and sharing their stories, and hopefully we can spread these stories wide to the next generation, encourage them to speak up, and hopefully they realize that change can happen, that we are still stuck in medieval times in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
I just want to look in the chat, any other questions from anybody else, or anything else that anybody wants to say or share? Any lasting advice for veterinarians or the next generation of students who want to create change?
Just speak up. I'm going to say just speak up. One of the key strategies that is also outlined in the article is moral courage. So when you're exposed to this moral conflict, you can develop the moral distress, the anguish, the pain or you can develop moral courage. And one of the key ways to develop moral courage is to speak up and stand up against the injustice or the conflict.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just see like how all of these activists who, you know, experienced these things in the past, how they have gotten strength through moral courage, doing these brave acts of activism and raising awareness about this. I say like I never did a terminal surgery, but that's actually not true. I had to do a terminal surgery in undergrad on a mouse. We had this stupid lab where we would do vasectomies on some mice and castrations on the other. And then we would cut them open a couple of weeks later to see how their accessory sex organs looked, showing that the vasectomized mice obviously had large normal sized accessory sex organs and the castrated mice did not.
What a shock.
Yeah, nobody needed to kill mice to do this. And we used this horrible anesthesia where the mice were walking across the table during surgery. We were horrified by this. We were using dirty instruments, so many of the mice got infections afterwards, and many of them died before we were able to kill them. And
Yikes.
I did have one girl in my class who was like outraged by it, and we wrote whoever was in charge of the department, and they wanted to have a meeting with us. And I got scared because I was like at that same time applying for vet school, and I like at the same school because I did my undergrad at UC Davis and then did vet school at UC Davis. And I'm like, I don't want UC Davis putting me on some sort of list. I am just gonna shut my mouth and get into vet school, and then I can make change when I'm out. But I think maybe that had an effect on me too, why I am more activisty now, because once you get a little bit older and a little bit more courage, you're like, this whole thing is so messed up.
Yeah, I had a genetics lab in undergrad that I still have horrible conflicted feelings about, you know, that they use rats in, and it was just like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? I knew it was wrong. It felt wrong. It felt horrible. It was upsetting for weeks afterwards, and I've never forgotten it. And it was something that did not need to be done. It was looking at DNA. It's like,
I had a
DNA
physiology class like that. It was a pre-veterinary class.
yeah,
And our class was a lot like what Crystal described. We were doing surgery on rats and killing them and, you know, measuring their testosterone levels after castration and things. And it was ridiculous. It was horrific. And I'll never, it is moral distress because I did it and I'll never forgive myself for it.
yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, getting out and going through with euthanasias that you question and go, you know, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It didn't feel right. You know, there's so many situations that we encounter as veterinarians, and I guess we do have to pick our battles, and we do have to be able to articulate why we have the stance that we have and why we feel the way that we do. And we all have to develop our own moral compass too. And it has to resonate well within us. So I'm hoping that, you know, veterinary students now, or veterinarians suffering from the moral conflicts that they have, can garner support from each other and know that it's okay to talk about it and to normalize compassion.
Absolutely. And we have to kind of adjust the moral compass of these institutions, of the veterinary profession, of the AVMA. You know, they have a lot of power to help us in this, you know, just having.
Well, it's like Alejandra mentioned, you know, the moral fatigue and trauma, you know, that occurs and that is studied and occurs in a lot of different professions. And, you know, it's similar to like you know, a law enforcement person who is just sort of swept up in the system, but, you know, knows something's wrong, but they, you know, and they're, my God, do you think we have a retaliation for speaking up?
Oh my
That's a
gosh,
whole
yeah.
other.
If I can say two things, one is, you know, dealing with things like IACUC. I'm on the research side, dealing with, you know, IACUC or ALAC or any of these other organizations that are meant to be there in order to make things better, to decrease the number of animals used and this and that. None of it, they don't, these are industries now, these are businesses. And I think that they have to be dismantled and reworked, or just dismantled and gotten rid of altogether. I think, you know, we're up against big industries.
Right.
You know, there was a place called GEMCOR next to me at the university, genetically engineered mouse model. And like, that's all they did all day long, is just genetically engineer new mouse models for things that there are already existing mouse models for. But, you know, you can never have too many mouse models for the same thing.
Well, that's an inherent flaw in capitalism, is always trying to find that other market, whether it's necessary or ethical or not.
And Madhu has a star in the chat. Okay.
Madhu?
Yeah. Hi, everybody, and thank you. I'm learning so much from you. I'm not a veterinarian or anything, but in college in India, I did do some biology classes in college, and they made us dissect frogs, like literally unlimited number of frogs, mouse, like big rats, pigeons, even earthworms, you know, there's little tiny ones, which you see them crawling in when it rains. And we had to like just cut them open and like pin their skin both sides. And like, I don't know, like, I still think about them. Like, I think about those little earthworms. I said, oh my God, like, how did I like pin their skin? And like, they were like half alive, you know? So that still traumatizes me. And I have science background, but with biology, I didn't even do major in biology. I did major in chemistry. So I don't know why they made me do like a couple of classes of biology, and they made us like dissect all these animals, which was very, very horrible.
Yeah, and especially if they are just like breeding these animals for the sole purpose of killing, when there's so many animals and humans in the world who would love to give their bodies to the next generation to learn on. So yeah. Well, we have gone over, so any parting thoughts from anyone? This was fantastic and so inspiring to hear all your voices. Any last words? Otherwise, I'll shut it down. But thank you all for coming. I hope you all can come next month, last Saturday of every month at 5 o'clock. We'll be meeting, and I actually hope to bring on Dr. Tamara Bronkers to talk about her story. We've been chatting, so if our schedules align, we'll have her on, and she'll be able to talk about confronting the Department of Agriculture over there in the UK. So
fantastic.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you all. You have a good evening.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.